This is a drug class where the wrong move in either direction, stopping it or starting it at the wrong time, can put your patient in danger. Let's get it right. Quick 30-second disclaimer first. Everything here is for learning, not a substitute for your own clinical judgment. Always check current guidelines and your local protocols. Okay, now let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. Good to have you here. Today we're tackling beta blockers. I know they can feel like a messy, overlapping list to memorize, but stick with me. By the end of this, the whole class is going to make sense as one connected picture: how to classify them, when to start them, when to stop them, and the traps I want you to sidestep. Let's take it step by step. Let's start by building a map, because I promise once the classification clicks, the side effects and contraindications almost explain themselves. You won't have to brute force memorize them. 3 generations. First, non-selective, they block beta-1 and beta-2. Propranolol, nadolol, timolol, sotalol. And notice why that matters. Blocking beta-2 is exactly what gives you bronchospasm and cold hands. Tuck that away, we'll come back to it. Second, cardioselective, focused on beta-1 in the heart. Metoprolol, bisoprolol, atenolol, esmolol. Here's the part people miss, so let me flag it early. That selectivity is dose-dependent. Crank the dose and it slips away and beta-2 gets blocked too. Third, the vasodilators, carvedilol and labetalol through alpha-1 blockade. Nebivolol through nitric oxide. Hold on to this map. Everything ahead hangs off it. So where do beta blockers really earn their place? Let's start with the heavyweight heart failure with reduced EF. If you take one thing from this slide, take this. Only 3 of them reduce mortality: carvedilol, bisoprolol, and metoprolol succinate. That's a class 1, level A recommendation, and it's not a class effect, so those 3 are worth committing to memory. They genuinely change outcomes. After that, rate control in AF, metoprolol, atenolol, propranolol, or 4-esmolol. Aortic dissection, for esmolol or labetalol, driving the heart rate under 60 to protect that aortic wall. And in acute coronary syndrome, an early oral beta blocker within 24 hours is class 1, but only in the right patient. Not someone in acute heart failure, a low output state, or with another contraindication. And that idea of the right patient is exactly where things have changed, so let's go there. Now, this is the part 1 really want you to update, because the teaching you may have heard is out of date. For years the rule was simple: heart attack, everyone goes home on a beta blocker. Not anymore, and that's a good thing because the new approach is smarter. We stratify by ejection fraction. So let's walk it together. Slowly. Below 40%, easy call, continue indefinitely, the mortality benefit is rock solid. 40 to 49, the in-between zone, the evidence leans toward benefit, so continue. Now stay with me at 50% and above, because this is the nuanced bit. With hypertension, lean toward continuing. The ABYSS sub-analysis found that stopping in hypertensive patients raised cardiovascular events. But preserved EF, stable past a year, no hypertension? It's now reasonable to stop. Reduce AMI, reboot, and a pooled meta-analysis all show no benefit from initiating long-term beta blockers, and Smart Decision showed that stopping after a year is non-inferior to continuing. The one thing that doesn't change with EF, that early in-hospital window within 24 hours, still earns its class 1, as long as the patient's stable. Don't worry about memorizing every cell, just hold the shape. Low EF, keep. High EF and stable, you can let go. Let's give a few agents their moment, because each has a role that's genuinely worth knowing. Propranolol's the all-rounder: migraine prevention, essential tremor, portal hypertension for variceal bleed prophylaxis, performance anxiety, and a primary symptomatic agent in thyroid storm, not just an adjunct, because at high doses it even blocks peripheral conversion of T4 to T3. For hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, here's your one-word anchor: non-vasodilating. Propranolol, metoprolol, atenolol, nadolol are your friends. Carvedilol, nebivolol, labetalol are not. Their vasodilation worsens the outflow tract obstruction. Sotalol works 2 ways at once: class 2 and class 3, handy for ventricular tachycardia and AF rhythm control, but it stretches the QT and can cause torsades, so we treat it with respect. Labetalol's your partner in hypertensive emergencies and in pregnancy, and please pair that in your memory with its opposite. Atenolol is contraindicated in pregnancy because of fetal growth restriction. Esmolol, a half-life of about 9 minutes, so it's your option when you want control you can dial off quickly. acute rate control, perioperative aortic dissection. And carvedilol has a quiet second career beyond heart failure. In portal hypertension, its alpha-1 blockade reduces intrahepatic vascular resistance and drops portal pressure better than propranolol, at much gentler doses than in heart failure, roughly 6.25 to 12.5 milligrams a day. And nebivolol vasodilates through nitric oxide, with fewer metabolic effects. Side effects now, and here's where that map from the beginning pays you back, just like I promised. Cardiovascular, bradycardia, hypotension, heart block, worsening failure. Respiratory, bronchospasm, and you already know why. That's the beta-2 effect, worst with non-selective agents. See? It's connecting. Now this next one is a pearl I really want to land because it can save a life. Beta blockers hide the adrenergic alarms of a low blood sugar, the racing heart, the tremor, but sweating is preserved because that's cholinergic, not beta-adrenergic. So in a beta-block diabetic, a cold sweat may be the only warning you get. Hold on to that one. On the CNS side, fatigue, sleep disturbance, vivid dreams, traditionally tied to lipophilic agents like propranolol and metoprolol. And let me put one worry to rest. Depression gets blamed on beta blockers all the time, but the best evidence, a large systematic review of randomized trials, shows no real increase in risk. You can let that myth go. Peripheral effects, cold extremities, Raynaud's, and a small but real increase in sexual dysfunction. And sotalol, keep that cutie on your radar because it can tip into torsades. So when should you hold back? Symptomatic bradycardia, and I'll keep stressing symptomatic because a COM rate in the high 50s is not a reason to stop, and I don't want you pulling a helpful drug for no reason. High-grade heart block without a pacemaker. Decompensated heart failure or shock needing 4 inotropes, don't start one there. Hypotension under 100 systolic. Severe reactive airway or active bronchospasm. Pheochromocytoma, alpha block first every time, classically with phenoxybenzamine, or you provoke a hypertensive crisis from unopposed alpha. And cocaine, this is the one that trips people up, so let's be clear and kind to ourselves about it. It's the pure beta blockers we avoid, because blocking beta while leaving alpha unopposed worsens coronary vasoconstriction and hypertension. A mixed agent like labetalol might be acceptable once a vasodilator's on board. The 2024 ASAM/AAP stimulant guideline says if a beta blocker is used, choose a mixed agent, and the ACC/AHA rates labetalol class 2B here. But the evidence is weak, level C, expert opinion, and case series, so first line really stays benzodiazepines, nitrates, and calcium channel blockers with phentolamine for refractory vasospasm. If you forget the fine print, just hold on to this. Pure beta blocker plus fresh cocaine, don't. This is the slide you'll lean on during real call nights, so let's make it stick. In acute decompensated heart failure, continue the beta blocker if you possibly can. Stopping cold actually raises mortality. Still struggling after diuretics? Have the dose. Only fully stop if they need 4 inotropes or they're in cardiogenic shock. Perioperatively, 2 simple rules. Never abruptly stop a chronic beta blocker, you'll get rebound tachycardia, angina, even MI, and never start one the morning of surgery. If you're initiating, begin at least a week ahead. For symptomatic bradycardia, heart block, or hypotension with hypoperfusion, hold and reassess. No heroics. And the one I never want you to forget. Never stop abruptly. Always taper over 1 to 2 weeks, or you'll trigger a rebound sympathetic surge. That single habit will keep your patients safe. Let's bring it home with the pearls, the things I'd want you to walk away holding. In heart failure, start low and go slow, but always reach the target dose, don't strand them halfway. Metoprolol tartrate is not succinate. Only the succinate extended release form has mortality data in HFrEF, and that distinction matters. In acute decompensated heart failure, don't reflexively pull a beta blocker the patient is already on. Continuation is associated with lower mortality. Have it if they're refractory and stop only with hypoperfusion, inotropes, or shock. Remember the post-MI shift, it's now ejection fraction stratified, not beta blockers for all. Reactive airway disease is not an absolute contraindication to cardioselective agents like metoprolol or bisoprolol. In thyrotoxicosis, beta blockers control symptoms, but abrupt withdrawal can precipitate thyroid storm. And for overdose, think multimodal vasopressors first line, high-dose insulin, glucagon as an adjunct, and VAECMO for refractory shock. And that's beta blockers, start to finish, all one connected picture, just like I promised at the top. You did the hard part by sticking with it. This was the fast tour, so go read the full guidelines when you can, and always think it through for the patient in front of you. That's what makes you a good clinician, not just a good test taker. References are in the description. If this helped it, click subscribe and share it with someone on your team, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.